Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Hi, I'm Tony Williams, and welcome to Brooklyn Savvy. Well, we're here with Yvonne Broady. Now, you are the author of Brave in a New World Guide for the Grieving Spouse.
It's a Brave in a New World, a guide to grieving the loss of
The
a spouse.
spouse. Yeah. And it's an amazing book. But before we get into this topic, I want to introduce our Savvy Panelistas. We have Nomiki McCrillis, Colette Ellis, and Phyllis White-Thorne. We're also joined by Sanjay Murray. And Sanjay is on this panel as a guest, and I'm so delighted that you joined us because I know that you have recently lost a spouse, and the fact that you're going to come here and share your story is just really simply amazing, and I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. And I know we're going to get through this show. We're going to get through. So, Yvonne, what is it that we should expect if there is a loss of a spouse? And does that grieving differ from other ways that we grieve other loved ones? But first, let's talk about the spouse.
The thing that makes losing a spouse different from losing a sibling or a parent or a child, they're all different. They're all different. None is worse than the other. None is better than the other.
I have to agree with that. There are folks that might want to say that, but
they just say that.
Yeah,
but I want to clarify that. That the way I perceive it, they're all different. And what makes losing a spouse a little bit more intense is the fact that we choose our partner. That makes it even just different and sometimes even more intense. When I lost my husband, I didn't know what to expect. But I remember standing in my bedroom and thinking, okay, I'm going to jump into this, whatever it is that I'm going to experience. And I ended up really in a state of shock. And then one or two people that I did remember that they at some point had lost spouses, when I asked them, they always said to me, time. Time is what will help you get through this experience. Anyway, you can expect to feel numb. And the numbness is the fact that you're in a state of shock. And you can also expect to feel anxious. I call that one of the stages that I've created. I call that the Teeter-Totter Stage. And you can expect to feel anxious. You might feel agoraphobic. You may not want to go out. So you're going to have all of these emotions mixed in with anger. And you might want to just scream and rail at God or jump up and down. You're going to have feelings of regret. You're going to have feelings of guilt. So you're going to have all these feelings that are coming together.
The guilt and the regret, yes, right, yes.
I remember that I felt like I felt badly that my husband the night before had said to me, I feel like I'm being pulled out of the top of my head. And I thought maybe he had a headache. So I knew we were going to go to...
That's an interesting sensation.
Yeah, and
right.
I knew that we were going to go to the hospital the next day. We couldn't get an ambulance at night, but I knew that, when we go to the hospital the next day, they'll take care of him. And later, when I mentioned that to somebody and said, Chuck said that he felt like he was being pulled out of the top of his head, somebody said, his spirit was leaving his body. And so I explored that, and I did research on that, and really, in that soft spot in the top of a baby's head, it covers what is called the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is where it is believed that the spirit comes into the body and leaves the body. And my husband said, I feel like I'm being pulled out of the top of my head. The fact that he was able to say that to me, and later when I researched it, I was able to get some kind of explanation and confirmation on what it was that was going on. And so what was happening is that he was transitioning. His spirit was leaving the body. And so after, the next day, I woke up like about 8:30. I kind of like, it was almost like ethereal. It was like a funny kind of feeling. And I looked over at my husband, and I knew that he was still breathing, and I fell back asleep. And when I woke up again, he was gone. And so for a long time, I felt very, very guilty that I had fallen back asleep. And but eventually, I was able to work out those guilty feelings.
Now, let's, and not to transition the conversation too quickly, but how does one move on? Because I think that, as you go through the feelings of numbness and the anger that you spoke about, and then of course the guilt, the regret, what is the process of moving on with your life?
Well, I think you have to decide, am I going to be distracted by other activities and not deal with the hurt and the pain? And it's very
And is that
easy
okay?
to do that.
Is that okay to do?
In my opinion, it is not. People tell you all the time, oh, I have my grandchildren, oh, I have my job, I went back to work. But I have had people come back to me and say, I am so sorry that I did not deal with the grief in the very beginning. Because that grief never goes away. That sorrow never goes away. It stays with you. And if it is not dealt with, it can eventually turn into something else that will impact your body.
So, Chandra, you want to speak to that?
Yeah. I think we all have, we deal with grief in different ways. I was married to a wonderful man for 25 years, but he lived his life. That book has closed, and now I must move on like so many other people. And so what do? Do we stay and do we dwell in it? No, we experience that loss. We experience that lost love, but at some point, we can't stay in it. And so for me, as I move forward, I take what was in the past. That's why it's called history, and it lives in us. It lives in us for us to take that and move forward in it. And for me, moving forward means in between the day that I was born and the day that I will someday go, but we have that dash, and we must live our dash.
Well,
We
and
must
what
move
I'm
forward,
hearing
yes.
both of you say is grief is the initial phase of loss, and that's internal. And then mourning is the next
Right,
stage,
yeah, right.
which
That's
is
the
what I'm hearing you
process.
say, taking
Right.
the history, taking the emotion and putting it out. And that's the mourning process.
Yes.
Generally, it could start from, the funeral experience and planning and moving and sharing all that emotion with those around us at that moment, which is very, very emotional. That's the first type of, so initially that grief is all within us. It's the turmoil, it's all the feelings you mentioned, it's the guilt, and then moving it outward is the actual mourning process and starting to heal.
Right. Now, when healing, I think also, we always think of the healing process that maybe we did something wrong. But it also could be when you're living with someone who has been ill for 10 years and they're losing their lives and they realize that. So to go each day knowing that your life is precious and that each day is being taken away, that individual, your spouse, he or she has that loss. They're grieving. You're grieving with them. But for order for you to be a good wife or just to be their lover, to be their friend, you go through things yourself. But you can't take the anger that they may be feeling and take it upon yourself to say, I'm causing it. No, that's their dash that they're living. You are there to help to exist and go through it. But don't take what their turmoil and say that it's yours. Your job is to leave it back there each day, the day before, and move forward the next day to create a better minute or a better moment in their lives. And it's not you. It's not you.
No, there's no absolutely correct way to grieve, but the important thing is that we do grieve.
And you need to understand too, because oftentimes, you know, we're talking about a spouse, but there's other people that may have been loved ones of the spouse. There could be former spouses. There could be other people. You know, so it's all, you know, certain grief is acknowledged, and then other grief, maybe you feel that you need to hold it to yourself, which is very real, because I think a lot of us can fall into that.
And even as
okay.
you hold it to yourself, what's important is that you acknowledge it.
Right.
Right.
So yes, there are some times when it's not, you may not feel it's appropriate to share it, but to acknowledge and to own your own feelings and to in your own way. So when you were talking before about grief, what came to me is that everybody's different. Everybody has different circumstances under which they may have lost someone. And so you're gonna, all of that is going to determine how you feel. I remember when a girlfriend of mine, her husband was shot. And even as I said it, it surprised. And when we went to her house right away, she would not allow the doctors to give her a sedative. She said, I want to feel everything.
That's right.
I want to acknowledge this. This was her way of dealing with her grief. So I imagine that we all have our ways of
I
managing.
often wonder too, were you going to say something, Colette?
I was just going to say, because to your point earlier when you said the fact that it can impact your body. So the body doesn't lie, right? So the body can store trauma, hurts, grief, loss. So that aspect of staying present to it, and even if you're not always able to process it in that moment, but not numbing yourself,
Right.
And knowing that it will be challenging, but releasing it whatever way, whether that's talking, journaling, tapping, whatever it is, to help your body to
It's
begin
tapping.
to release.
What do you mean when you say
tapping.
tapping?
Oh,
I know
tapping.
about
Yeah.
journaling, but I don't know about tapping.
So tapping is emotional freedom technique. So it's tapping on actually
Your third eye?
You can tap. Yeah. So there's an eyebrow point, the side of the eye, under
What
the
does
eye.
that do for you?
So you're tapping on, if you're familiar with acupuncture, it's pretty much the similar meridians. And each meridian is connected to a part of your body. So I always say stomach. If you ever have indigestion, tapping under the eye. And they're also connected to different emotions. So whether it's grief, trauma, loss. So when I work with clients, we do tapping to help release whether that's current trauma or past trauma.
Now, you talked about being compassionate with yourself. What does that look? What do you mean when you say compassionate
So
with self?
I
Because so
have-
many of us are hard on ourselves, just naturally. You know.
And you know, you're really kind of surprised. So a lot of women that I've spoken to are really surprised that they're grieving, you know, 2 years later, 3 years later. I met a woman 3 years. She said, "I can't get out of bed." She said, "I can't." She said, "I can't get out of the bed." She said, "I am so." But everybody is different, and so I feel that there's no right or wrong about that. And that particular person that couldn't get out of bed after 3 years, she is now remarried. And
She got out of bed.
Yes, she got out of bed. Yes, you have to move.
I was going to take it further.
Keep it going. Don't go there.
I don't know.